India is surrounded by enemies. Countries are banning India, isolating itself. Experts say India is harming itself. What awaits India? Why are neighbors distancing themselves? Why is India's enemy list growing? Nepal is now on India's enemy list. In 2015, Nepal's new constitution faced strong objections from India. India imposed a blockade, cutting off essential supplies, causing a crisis in Nepal. Nepal saw this as a threat to its sovereignty. Why are neighboring countries distancing from India? Why is India's list of adversaries growing? Nepal is now on India's enemy list. India wants Nepal under its influence, but Nepal rejects India's big brother attitude. 2015, Nepal's new constitution faced strong objections from India. India's blockade on Nepal cut off supplies, creating a crisis. Nepal saw this as a threat to its sovereignty. Nepal countered India by aligning with China, strengthening ties. This strained India-Nepal relations, complicating India-China relations. India imposed a blockade on Nepal, cutting off supplies, which Nepal saw as a threat to its sovereignty. In response, Nepal leaned towards China, strengthening ties to counter India. This strained Nepal-India relations. The India-China relationship also grew more complex. Tensions rose as India asserted itself regionally, challenging China. After this incident, Nepal leaned towards China, straining Nepal-India relations. The India-China relationship became more complicated. Since the 1962 India-China War, their relationship has been like a Cold War. In the early 2010s, tensions rose as India asserted itself as a regional power, challenging China. Disputes over the South China Sea further complicated matters. India sought to maintain influence in South Asia, but China rejected India's influence. In 2020, a clash in the Galwan Valley resulted in casualties. Now China challenges India's influence in South Asia. The relationship has been tense. In the early 2010s, tensions rose as India asserted regional power, challenging China. The situation worsened with South China Sea disputes. India thought challenging China would maintain its South Asia influence and grow internationally. India didn't realize China had become more powerful. China wouldn't accept India's influence, and India resisted China's dominance. In 2020, a clash in Galwan Valley, Ladakh, caused casualties. China now challenges India's influence and has created new hostility. But India did not realize that China had already become a more powerful country than it was. Therefore, China is unwilling to accept India's influence in South Asia, and India is not ready to accept China's dominance. In the meantime, in 2020, a clash occurred between India and China in the Galwan Valley of Ladakh, resulting in casualties on both sides. As a result of India's actions, China is now not just challenging India's influence in South Asia, but has also created a new hostility between the two countries. The China-India conflict extends beyond military power to economic and diplomatic influence, with both nations subtly impacting each other. India has inadvertently become an adversary to China. As India expanded its influence over neighbors, Sri Lanka was affected. India's big brother approach soured relations with Sri Lanka, especially post-2000. India opposed Sri Lanka by supporting Tamil rights, interfering in internal matters. Sri Lanka didn't take this lightly and sought alternatives. Post-2015, Sri Lanka leaned towards China, worsening ties with India. China's growing economic presence in Sri Lanka worried India, which wanted Sri Lanka within its influence. India's pressure was seen as a threat, making Sri Lanka a new adversary. India stands against Indian pressure, supporting Tamils in Sri Lanka, meddling in their matters. Sri Lanka ignored India's intervention. India pressured Sri Lanka, forcing alternatives. Relations worsened as Sri Lanka leaned towards China, expanding influence, worrying India. Improved Sri Lanka-China ties discomforted India, wanting Sri Lanka in its sphere. India's pressure was seen as a threat, making Sri Lanka an enemy. India's big brother stance turned neighbors into foes, including the Maldives. A Maldives government outside India's influence strained ties. The Maldives leaned towards China, challenging India. Post-2018 elections, Maldives moved from Indian influence, worsening relations. China launched projects in the Maldives. This made India even more worried. The improvement in China's relations with Sri Lanka became a major source of discomfort for India, because India wanted Sri Lanka to remain within its sphere of influence and China's influence could not increase there. This military and diplomatic pressure from India began to appear as a threat to Sri Lanka. This attitude of India turned Sri Lanka into a new enemy. When India's big brother attitude turned neighboring countries into enemies one by one, Maldives was not left out of its list. In 2013, when a one-Guam government was formed in the Maldives outside India's sphere of influence, relations became more difficult. The new Maldivian government then started leaning towards China rather than India, which became a big challenge for India, especially after the Maldivian government went against Indian influence in the 2018 elections. Relations between the two countries deteriorated further. China then started providing one economic project after another to the Maldives. Meanwhile, India begins to feel threatened by this situation, as the Maldives holds a crucial position for its maritime routes. India's hostility is not just with Pakistan, China, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and the Maldives. Bangladesh has also made it to this list. The Indian government's actions regarding the Citizenship Amendment Act in 2019 started to sour relations with Bangladesh. These actions were perceived as a threat to the Muslim population in Bangladesh, resulting in a significant rift in India-Bangladesh relations. Meanwhile, after the July 2024 revolution, when the Indian ally Sheikh Hasina's government fell and a new interim government came to power, Bangladesh is no longer heeding India's words. Additionally, various false propaganda regarding Bangladesh's internal matters has been spread through Indian media. Such efforts have created more hostility and instability in India-Bangladesh relations, leading Bangladesh to secure a new place on India's list of neighboring enemy countries. When it comes to the heroine, Pakistan's name cannot be excluded from the list. Although India and Pakistan were born as separate countries after the partition of the subcontinent in 1947, the issue of Kashmir has been the main point of hostility between the two countries. India claims Kashmir as its own and engages in various military conflicts with Pakistan. Pakistan believes that India's dominance stems from a desire to control Kashmir and South Asia. While India wants to establish its regional power, Pakistan does not want to allow India to expand its dominance and wants to establish its own rights in Kashmir. Additionally, when India revoked the special status of Kashmir in 2019, the situation worsened as India began to oppress the Muslims in Kashmir. All these events have turned Pakistan into India's perpetual foe. There are occasional reports of clashes along the India-Pakistan border, as though a major war could break out at any moment. On one hand, India wants to establish its regional power, while on the other hand, Pakistan does not want to allow India to expand its dominance in any way and aims to establish its own rights in Kashmir. Moreover, when India revoked the special status of Kashmir in 2019, the situation became even more difficult, as India began to oppress the Muslims in Kashmir, almost starting an undeclared war with Pakistan. All these events have turned Pakistan into India's eternal enemy. That's why there are occasional reports of clashes along the India-Pakistan border, as if a major war could break out at any moment.